Hello, and welcome to week 12 of English 112 here at Delta College. We are entering into the home stretch, and we are starting the final project, which is the proposal paper. So, this week we're going to talk about proposal writing and research methods. So, let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so if you recall, when we argue, there are three types of claims that we make, which are claims of value, truth, and policy. And we've already covered claims of value and truth so far. A claim of value makes a value judgment that something is good or bad. A claim of truth says that something is so and makes some sort of statement. Even if it's not factually true, it's presented as if it is a truth. And then finally, the claim of policy says that something should happen. So it looks at a situation and finds that the situation is bad or there's some problem with it, and then offers a solution or a way of fixing that problem through an implementation of policy, some sort of plan of action to be taken. So a proposal really combines the other two types of claims. It looks at a situation and says, here's the situation, here's what's going on, and this situation is bad and needs to change. And then it introduces that new element of making a suggestion for what change needs to be occur or needs to be brought about. So a proposal consists of three main parts, which are the problem statement, the argument, and the counter argument. So let's look at each of these. The problem statement identifies what the problem is and then validates the problem. So it needs to explain why it is a legitimate problem that people need to invest resources into solving. And you're not just complaining about something that is a problem for you. It has to be a larger problem that really needs to be addressed and solved. And then, if possible, it needs to identify the causes of the problem, because the easiest way to solve a problem is to identify the causes and then eliminate those. So if there's no causes, then there's no problem. The second part of a proposal is the argument itself. This is where you present your solution and you discuss the benefits of the solution or how you would go about implementing the solution. And then the third part is the counter argument. This is where you look at the opposing position and you refute their objections and you consider alternative solutions and reject those by showing how your solution is better than the alternatives. And we've already practiced counter arguing in the editorial. So this is just an extension of that practice that we've already gone through. So to illustrate the way a proposal is put together and the way it works, I've already linked several articles to proposals on e-learning. They're found in the reading section. And also, if you recall, one of the first readings that we looked at in here was Jonathan Swift's Modest Proposal, which is the classic example of a proposal argument, even though that is meant to be satirical. And when you write your own proposal, if you want to approach it satirically, then you're more than welcome to do that. The example that we're looking at today is a TED Talk given by Jennifer Granholm, the former governor of Michigan, on where she proposes a clean energy policy. So I've linked the video here on e-learning. I want you to pause this one and then go watch that. It's only about 12 or 13 minutes. So it's fairly short. So go ahead and take a look at that and then come back here and we will analyze her argument. Okay, so if you'll notice, Granholm's proposal has those three parts. It has the problem statements, the arguments, and counter argument. So let's break those down. In her problem statement, she really looks at one primary issue, even though she addresses related problems that are caused or contributing to that main issue of a lack of jobs. Her question is, how do we create high-paying jobs in the U.S.? So she's saying there is a lack of jobs, lack of high-paying jobs in the U.S., And the main cause for that is it's cheaper for companies to outsource and to go to another country and pay employees there. Another issue she looks at is climate change. What is causing, or how do we, why aren't we adequately addressing climate change? And the main cause of that is that there is no national energy policy to address it, at least not here in the United States. And the other issue she looks at is how the US is falling behind China. And the US is falling behind other countries, but she primarily looks at China. So US is falling behind China, and what is the cause of that? That is congressional gridlock. So all of these problems are related to each other, and her solution that she offers tries to address each of those things. So again, the problem statement explains what the problem is and explains why it's a problem. So it validates it, and then it tries to look at the causes of the problem. It tries to address those. Her argument then is to create a competition for energy funding. What she wants to do, or what she proposes, is that if the United States offers a competition to come up with ways of addressing or producing cheap energy, then that will create jobs within the United States, and high-paying jobs. And it will address the issue of climate change and help to make the U.S. become a leader in that area. So she looks at specific advantages to this idea of this competition. It would respect states' rights because states would opt into this competition. They wouldn't be required to. It would be voluntary, and it would allow states to capitalize on their own resources. So each state could contribute something to this, and each state would benefit, not just in terms of the the jobs that would be created, but of course, the benefits for the environment. And she says it would help foster innovation, that it would help create a national policy from the state level up, which will encourage entrepreneurs to come up with new ideas on how to produce clean energy. And then in the counter argument, she really looks at one issue, which is how do you fund this sort of competition? And she does point out that it would be fairly cheap, relatively speaking, to fund it. She compares it to the Obama era policy for their education, where they had a race to the top competition for education funding. And the dollar amount, which I don't recall, but it was, as she points out, less than 0.5% of the federal budget. So her counter argument is, how do you fund this? Congress might not provide the funds because, of course, Congress is known for this incredible gridlock. Congress cannot agree on anything. And her refutation is, well, you could bypass Congress by using the private sector for funding. And there is precedent for that. If you look at the way that private companies are looking into space exploration and finding ways to interact with the International Space Station. So space travel and space exploration is a big deal in the private sector. Well, you can take that kind of competition and apply it to energy policy as well. So I'm not saying that her proposal is a good one. I'm not saying that it will solve the problem. I'm just saying here's what her proposal is, and here's how her proposal works. Okay. So when you write your own proposal, you're going to have those three parts to it. You need your problem statement in which you present your problem, explain why it's a problem, and try to identify the causes of it. You need to have your argument, which is where you present your solution to the problem and how it would work. And then you need to present a counter argument where you anticipate objections to your solution and consider alternative solutions. And you refute the objections and show how your solution is better than the alternatives. Like I said previously, the only really new element to this assignment is the research element. So we need to incorporate research materials into your proposal. And I'll get a little bit more into the specific assignment later, but you need to be able to consider uh, the rhetorical strategies that you want to use. And one of those rhetorical strategies, as we've talked about, is the use of authority. So that means doing research. And so when it comes to research, there are primarily two types of research materials. Technically, there are three, which are primary, secondary, and tertiary, but it's primary and secondary resources that are the most valuable. Tertiary sources are those which tend to be more traditional reference work. So stuff like encyclopedias and dictionaries, the kind of material that you would find in the reference section of a library. And you can use those, but you can only use those as starting points. For this assignment and for really all research or the bulk of research that you do in college and in the academic world, it's primary and secondary. So primary research are those materials where the information is gathered firsthand, either by you going out into the field and doing some sort of field work, or through exploring firsthand materials. So for example, if you were to do a research project on a certain author, then you would consult what the author has written firsthand. So that would be considered the primary text or the primary research. Secondary research is when someone else has done the research, has done the legwork, and has published their findings, and you're using their findings, or someone is using their findings. So primary research, again, it's firsthand. It comes directly from the source, such as through surveys. And there are two types of surveys. There are polls and there are questionnaires. Polls are quantifiable. That's where you try to identify statistics and percentages, and how many people, for example, feel this way as opposed to that way. And then questionnaires are more open-ended. They're qualifiable. A survey asks a question, and you want to see what people have to say. So not how many people think a certain way, but what they actually have to say. So you have surveys, observation, and by observation I mean something that can be documented. If you talk about, well, one time this happened to me, that doesn't count as research or as a primary source. So when it comes to observation, again, that's something that has to be able to be documented. So it's something which happens in a laboratory, for example, or maybe a case study where if you're looking at a certain type of illness and you interview a patient or work with a patient who has that illness, and you document the observations of the symptoms, that sort of thing. Or even if it's more of a social experiment where you set up some situation in the real world and then you document how people react to that situation. So that's the kind of firsthand observation that I'm talking about here. As I mentioned, experiments and interviews are both examples of primary sources because this is where you are gathering the data firsthand. So if you interview someone, or again, if you set up an experiment or perform an experiment, that's you doing the work. So that all counts as primary sources. Now, like I said, there are other types of primary sources. It depends on the type of research that you're doing. So if you're doing historical research, for example, primary sources would be stuff like court documents or birth records or personal journals or diaries or letters, that kind of stuff. As long as it comes directly from the source, sort of unfiltered or unedited, then that would count as a primary source. If you're researching a specific author, like I said, Their manuscripts would be examples of primary research. If you're looking at researching a particular artist, then the works that they produced firsthand would be primary sources. So in those cases, even though you didn't do the actual work of producing that manuscript or that work of art, because it's coming directly from the source, unfiltered and unedited, then that would count as a primary material. Secondary materials, as I said, this is where someone else has done the work, has done the research, and has published their findings, and you are using what they found in your own work. So stuff like websites, periodicals, such as newspapers, magazines, and published journals would be periodicals, reports, legal documents, files and records. Now, like I said, files and records, legal documents, those, it depends on sort of the level of work that's been put into them. So, for example, if you're looking at birth certificates or something along those lines, that's going to be firsthand material. So that would count as primary. But if you're looking at a report that a lawyer has put together or some sort of document that's been put together by someone else, then that would count as secondary. So again, secondary is when someone else has done the work and you are reporting on the work that they've done. So when it comes to using outside sources, and this applies more to the secondary sources, then you need to be able to evaluate them. And as we've talked about before, evaluation is all about finding the value in something, whether something's good or bad, or in this case, whether something is usable or not. So you need to be able to evaluate sources. And I want you to pause this video and go watch this other one that was put together by the Modesto Junior College on the CRAP test. So go ahead and watch that and then come back here. Okay, so the CRAP test is a way of evaluating sources. So the CRAP, of course, is an acronym for currency, relevancy, authority, accuracy, and point of view. These are 5 criteria that you need to consider when you evaluate a source. So currency refers to the timeliness of the material. It's not necessarily how recent the material is, because there's a difference between currency and recency. Currency means it was up to date at the time that it was published. Recent just means that it's close to you in time. So it's possible for something to be current but not recent. If no new information has come out in that area since the time that that material was published, then you could say that's still current, even though it's not recent. Relevancy, in the video, they talk about how relevant the material is to what you're working on, but relevancy is a little bit broader than that. It does incorporate that, but also in order to be relevant, then that means the information has to be on topic. It doesn't, if it goes off topic, it presents irrelevant information that doesn't apply to the situation or to the topic, then that's not going to be very helpful. So relevancy is both how relevant it is to you, but also how on topic the material is. Authority, you should know this one by now. Authority is the expertise of the source. So what are the source's credentials? Is it recognized as being credible or not? Accuracy, how accurate is the information? Is it true? Is it verifiable? And then finally, point of view. How biased is the information? Is it objective or subjective? So these are all points that you have to be able to consider when evaluating your sources, because not all sources, and especially sources that you find online, are going to be able to pass this test. So let's try out this CRAP test. Let's look at a couple articles, which I've linked on e-learning, and apply the crap test to them and see how well they pass. So pause here and go read this article from Variety's website on, excuse me, entitled Jessica Chastain, Chelsea Clinton, Sherry Redstone, Gayle King among honorees at Variety's Power of Women, New York. So go read that and then come back here. Okay, so now let's apply the crap test to it. How current is the information? Well, the source, the Variety website, is updated multiple times per day, and it has clear dates for when the article was posted. So that helps to indicate how current the information is. There is a slight problem with the currency here, and that particular article dates from 2017. So there have been other events since then. So it's not as up to date as it could be. But at that point in time, it was as up to date as it could be. So you can say that it is rather current. Relevancy. It stays on topic. It doesn't wander. It gives you the information and what's going on. So you can say, yeah, it is relevant within itself. It may not be relevant to your research, but the information presented in the article is relevant to the topic. The authority, that's a little problematic because it's not clearly attributed. The article is written by the Variety staff, which is really vague. There's no specific person who's taking credit for it. So that's a little problematic. But if you look at the source itself, which is Variety, you can see that it is a well-recognized source and a well-reputable source. And if you're not clear on the sort of credentials of the source, go to, in this case, go to the About page for Variety, and that will give you some more information about what Variety is and how well regarded it is. So when it comes to authority, you might have to do a little bit more research or background checking to see how credentialed or how credible the authority is. But in this case, Variety is well regarded. Accuracy. It is factually correct. Again, it's not necessarily current because the facts have changed. There have been other events since then. So it's not up to date according to right now, but at the time, the facts were correct. So it's accurate. And then the point of view, you can say there's a slight bias in that Variety is reporting on their own events. So they're promoting themselves to some extent. So you can say there's a slight bias there, but the information is presented fairly objectively. It's not saying that these women deserve to be honored. It's just saying that these women are being honored. Now, by contrast, take a look at Ross's article, Chelsea Clinton to receive Lifetime Impact Award for some reason. And right away, the title is problematic. So pause here and go read that article. Okay, so the currency of this, it seems to be updated regularly, or at least the website is, although there are no dates on the homepage. So you can't tell exactly when the information was posted, but it seems to be updated on a regular basis. So the site itself seems to be current, although it's a little difficult to verify that. The relevancy, as you'll notice in the article, it does go off topic. So it's not just reporting the same information as the previous article, but it goes off topic to explain or question as to why Chelsea Clinton deserves to be recognized. So jumping ahead to point of view, you can see there is a clear bias here. So that's problematic. The authority, there is a clear attribution. We know the article was written by Chuck Ross, but we don't know what his credentials are. And if you do a little bit more research, it becomes very unclear, or rather you can't gather a whole lot of information on his background and his credentials. So the authority is very shaky. What about the website that is for which the article was written? Yeah, you can do a little bit more research into that, but you'll see that it's not as well regarded as the previous, uh, the Variety article is, or the Variety magazine is. So the authority is shaky. The accuracy, well, you can see that a correction had been made to the article because the facts were originally incorrect. It makes a mistake thinking that originally Chelsea Clinton was receiving a Lifetime Achievement Award, and it did not understand that the award she was receiving was from the Lifetime Network. So the information was originally incorrect, although it has been revised to make that correction. And then the point of view, again, there's a clear bias. So this article does not pass the crap test to the same extent that the previous article does. So the previous article is much more reliable and credible, and it's something that could be used in a research or academic research project. This article, however, is not credible, it's not reliable, and you would not be able to use this in an academic research project. Okay, and so we come to the assignment, Essay 4, which is the proposal. So you need to write a proposal to fix a problem in your area of expertise. It must use at least one primary source and at least two secondary sources. And not just two secondary sources, but two different types of secondary sources. See the assignment sheet for more details. So again, two different types of secondary sources. So for example, one website and one periodical. Those would count as separate types of sources. I want you to get experience in doing research beyond what you can find online. Because most people now, when they think to do research, they go directly to Google or Wikipedia. And yeah, that gives you some information to start with, but you need to go beyond that for academic research. So you need to gain experience using research or doing research offline. So you need to use at least one primary source and two different types of secondary sources. The first draft is going to be due at the end of week 14, and then the final draft is due at the end of week 16, which is the final week of class. And then lastly, the homework assignment for this week. I want you to email me a link to an online article and a paragraph in which you explain if the source is reliable or not, according to the CRAP criteria. So I want you to apply the CRAP test to an online article and then email me your findings. So give me the link to the article and then write a paragraph in which you explain whether it passes the CRAP test or not. And that's going to be due at the end of this week. Okay, and that's it for this week. So, like I said previously, there's not a whole lot that's left to do. Like I said, we're in the home stretch, and it's going to be, I think, easier from this point on. Let's see, next week we're going to talk about, actually, we're not going to talk about anything next week, because next week is going to be a research week. I want to make sure that you have time to perform research for this project. So there's not going to be any lesson for next week. I want you to use the time on your own to conduct your research. And then the week after, when the first draft is due, we'll have a final revision and editing lesson. So go out there, do your research, try to have fun with it. And personally, I find research to be really enjoyable. Maybe that's just me. I don't know. But again, try to have fun with it. And I think it helps if you choose a topic that really interests you. So go ahead, do that, and I will talk to you again in the future. Until then, take care, have fun.